Today, October 24, 2009, I have the great privilege to be able to talk with Pastor and Christian Fellowship Ministries leader. What does the middle initial O stand for?
Othell.
And were you named after anybody?
Othell, O-T-H-E-L-L. And I've never heard of anybody but about 3 that were named Wayman.
It's not a very
have no idea
popular name.
Where it came from.
No idea. Okay. You recently had a birthday.
Right.
How old are you?
80 years old.
And of those years, how many have you been pastoring?
Since 1960.
What advice do you give your startup pastors about the ministry and going the long haul as you have?
Well, it is the long haul, and that they will not be, if they're looking to make money, it'll be a long time before they generally will be able to make a decent living.
Let's back up a few years and go back to Arkansas, your birthplace. In what part of the state were you born?
North central part, very close to the Missouri border, Mitchell, Arkansas.
Mitchell, Arkansas. Does the name have anything to do with the fact that you, the Mitchells, were from there?
Yes, there are a number of family members that are around there, and all of them are small farms, which in those days was nothing more than just bare subsistence.
Did you own those farms, or were they someone else's that you shared?
No, I don't think they owned them. Mm-hmm. I'd say it was rental properties. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What were your parents' names?
My father's name was George Stephen Mitchell, and my mother's name was Ida Sylvester Carrico.
What was it that your dad did for a living?
Well, my father, while we were there farming, and everyone in that area farmed, he bought an automobile, which is one of the first ones in the entire country there, and bid on and obtained a mail route. He carried the mail.
What year would that have been?
That would have been probably 1931, somewhere in that area, 31.
That mail route was one in Arkansas.
Yes, and then it seems to me that because we lived for a small amount of time in Missouri, just above the border, and so I think that might have been connected with that. I'm not sure of all the details of that.
You've got several siblings, and you were the 5th child born to your parents, the baby, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Tell me about the other children in your family. How many are boys and how many are girls? And name them.
2 older brothers and 2 older sisters. And then my parents were divorced, of course, when I was 5 years old, 6 years old maybe. And then my mother remarried, and I have a half-brother and half-sister.
So 7 children total?
Yeah, 7, right.
What is the difference in age between you and your oldest brother, George?
My oldest brother is 10 years older exactly, just about, than I am.
And were you close to any of your siblings growing up?
Not really, no. With a divided family. My mother lived in Phoenix. My dad lived in Prescott much of my life. And the family pretty much was going different directions. I lived with my father after the girls married early. And of course the boys were in the military. World War II took away from the family. And so I was with my father when he passed away in Prescott.
You've described your father as a drinker and a gambler.
Yes, however, he lived a stable life as far as working, because when we came to Arizona, he shortly after he came, he bid on mail routes, which were in those days called star route or rural routes today. And at one time had a mail route from Prescott to Clemenceau, which he drove twice a day and once on Sunday, over and back. And then he also had a mail route from Prescott to Bumblebee and a route from from Phoenix to Bumblebee. He owned all 3 of those and then employed people to do that. My mother actually carried the one from Phoenix to Bumblebee.
You mentioned recently in a sermon that you saw your grandfather reading the Bible. Do you think he was born again?
Yeah, I believe he was. He was actually, my mother says he was a lay preacher for the Methodist Church, early Methodist Church.
And so this was your mother's father?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And what was his name?
Josephus Carrico.
At what age were you when you saw him reading the Bible? And did he say anything to you about it? And how did his words affect you?
No, I would have been probably just maybe 16 and a half. It was after my father died. I went to Phoenix to live with my mother, and he was out visiting, and he was quite elderly. I would say in the 60s, that'd be my guess. And he came out to stay with my mother for a while, and my stepfather, and I was living with them. And so I lived in the back in a small house that was built for me and my older brother, who had gotten out of the military at that time. He would read the Bible in the yard in the summer in the sunlight, which it must have been spring or fall because it wasn't real hot. He never talked to me about it. I never knew. I have a vague memory of my mother and father in a church service while we were still in Arkansas. So I could not have been over 4 years old or so. And they had some exposure to church, but no knowledge. As far as I know, never any Christian experience.
In the early days of the Depression, farmers in the Dust Bowl began to leave the area to find a way to feed their families. And your dad got that contract. Was that part of why he left?
Yes, no doubt. Because during the Depression, very, very sparse income, very hard times, and there was some kind of program, I don't remember exactly the details. FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, required them to kill a certain amount of their stock. And that had to do with some federal program. It made it a real hardship on people.
How long was the trip, and how did your family travel here?
I have no idea how long it was. I know it was a long, long ways. And so...
You were a small child at the time.
Yes.
So you probably asked,
are we
there yet?
I've been 5 years old when we traveled. And so we came over the Verde Valley and over Mingus Mountain. At that time, it was not paved. It was a dirt road.
Mm-hmm. That was pretty treacherous.
Yeah.
What was Prescott like then?
Prescott was a very small town. Quite a number of people who had come out and immigrated from Arkansas, Oklahoma. There's a mass migration of people who lived in Forbing Park. That's where all the Okies and Arkies landed. Very austere housing, just very shacks, actually.
Did you help your dad with his delivery route?
No, I went with him. So in the younger years, I was the only one that was home. And I've been to Jerome Clemenceau many times. As far as helping, I wasn't large enough to help. Nothing to do to help. And then
was it still a dirt road when he had the route?
No, they paved it. And then I've been many times from Prescott to Bumblebee and Bumblebee to Phoenix on that old dirt road. Very, very primitive.
And then you attended grammar school here in Prescott at Lincoln?
I started with Miller Valley.
Miller Valley.
Miller Valley, at that time, you were just at the drop-off point of being in the Tules. I mean, there where the Miller Valley School is.
Okay.
The road forked. One went over to Willow Creek. One went on out toward Iron Springs. Those were dirt roads. And that was a dirt road. It's still there.
That makes sense, because you lived right there off Iron Springs.
Yes. We lived on Roost Street when Roost Street was a dirt road. Old house. That house is not there anymore. And then I went to Lincoln School then, probably 3rd to 6th grade, I'd say probably.
Was that because the family moved?
Yeah, we moved over in a different house.
And that was about that time you remember kids calling you an Arkie or an Okie?
Oh, yeah.
Well, was that a derogatory term?
Well, yeah, we were very poor and, patch clothes and all that.
When your mother left the home, she ran off with another man, Greg told me. Mm-hmm. Did your parents divorce at that time then?
Right at that time. I'm not sure of the exact timing. That's correct.
And you were how old when that happened?
I would have probably been 6 years old at the most, because we came out in 1933. It was soon thereafter.
So who took care of you after that?
Well, we had older sisters that lived in the house at that time. Mm-hmm. And so my memory was that they did some of the cooking, and my older sister probably principally.
What's her name?
Vera.
Is she still living?
Yeah, all my sisters still live.
Really? Where do they live?
They all live in Phoenix. My 2 brothers, 2 sisters, and half brother and half sister all live in Phoenix.
Did your mom stay in Prescott then?
She stayed for a good while. She worked as a housekeeper for 2 school teachers. Then at another time, she lived in Octave. Octave is down on the south summit of the Bradshaws toward Wickenburg.
Oh.
And there was a mine operative there, and she lived for a while with school teachers down there as a housekeeper, took care of their children.
And then after that, did you move again? Or did you stay over
my,
there?
My father has stayed in Prescott all his life, and he passed away at age 46.
And so you were living over off of Park at this time?
Yeah, when he passed away, we were living on Park Avenue, old house. That house is not there anymore either.
That house is gone?
Yeah, there's a stone house there now, and the garage is right on the street, and it was then.
Uh-huh.
There's an old wooden house back off the street, and the garage was right off where you drive right into the street. It's still there, but it's a stone garage now.
What kind of student were you?
Not very good. Being from a broken home is not much discipline or oversight at all. Just kind of grew up. But I was always a bright young man, and I could listen with half an ear and still get by,
Right. When your father passed away, what happened? What was the circumstances around that?
He had heart trouble, which I wasn't aware of, and actually none of the family really were aware of, but apparently had some heart attacks on the road driving, but this is we found out later. But he passed away in the middle of the night, and I woke up. Apparently he must have made sounds, and I found him in the bathroom on the floor dying at age 16. Very terrifying.
Wow.
And no telephone. I had to go to neighbors probably about 3 o'clock in the morning. They called the police and so on.
How did this tragedy affect your life?
Yeah, pretty traumatic. Not having a solid home or family surrounding, and then I moved to, of course, to live with my mother's stepfather in Phoenix. And so it's almost like being an intruder,
Yes, because now they had other children.
Oh, yeah. We had two other children.
Your mother was married at this time to her second husband. Yeah. Is that correct?
Third husband.
Or her third husband.
Yeah.
And he was called Passy.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Roy Passy.
Oh, Passy was his last name.
Passey. It's quite a large Mormon family, roots in the Mesa area.
I see. Where in Phoenix was your mom's house?
First was on West Taylor, about 35 West Taylor, which at that time was a fairly new subdivision, if you'd call it. Wasn't actually a subdivision, but it was a new area. This side of Arizona Park, and so they had a fairly new house there. Yeah.
And so then they built you and your brother space in the back.
It's almost like a shed. It's one room, and my older brother then had gotten out of the military, and he and I slept there in that back.
Did you get along with these new siblings of yours?
Yes, I guess somewhat, yeah. No.
And they're still alive, and they're in Phoenix.
Yeah.
And what are their names?
Freddie Joe Burke, and that's his sister. Half-sister, and we have a family reunion generally once a year.
Oh.
And most of the time they come.
Nice. And so that was your junior year in high school. What school were you enrolled?
Phoenix Union High School. I went there and failed. I think 2 classes, had to go to summer school, make that up. And then, because of no roots, very rootless, through friends and acquaintances in Prescott, I came to Prescott and worked as a bellboy at the head hotel because the owner, I knew her daughter, was in the same class with her. Her name was Billy Stroop, which is Billy Welch, was a teacher here for years. So I worked as a bellboy at the head hotel and lived there and finished off my senior year because they had a study work program. I can't remember what they called it.
And so you survived by working as a bellboy?
Yeah.
Tell about your years in high school. Did you have friends? And did you play any sports?
No sports, no.
What did you do for fun?
Juvenile delinquent, probably. In those years, Prescott is very, very small, very simple town. And high school was quite a subdued experience. I had a few friends, but I was not ever in the in crowd. Not into sports at all.
There was an in crowd then too, huh?
Oh yeah, definitely. And so kind of on the fringe. However, managed to buy a Model A Ford and stripped it down.
Oh.
Cut the back
Made
on
it a race car?
stripped down, just cars. And so, so I was one of the only kids that had cars in the whole thing. It was quite an interesting thing.
Did you have to get a driver's license then?
Yeah, I got a driver's license, but it was very loose. I was telling somebody the other day that I was driving and got stopped by the police just around the corner where the old Fenora Market is. I don't know if you know, be where Copper Basin Road turns out. I was going out that way, got stopped by the police, and no license on the car, no title. You know, they'd put you in prison today. But the policeman just kind of laughed and said, "Go on, you know."
When you would bring your shotgun to school,
yeah,
and store it in your locker,
and 22s, yeah.
Was that?
That's junior high school, where it's up where the courthouse is now.
Okay, the Washington.
Across from Washington School there.
Okay.
The courthouse building was the old boys club, they called it, when I came there in 70. And that was a junior high school then. It was the old high school, but they built the new high school. But I went to the junior high school then, and we would take our guns to school. I had friends, we'd walk out Government Canyon, where the Veterans Cemetery is. Right. Up that canyon, there's nobody lived in there, and go hunting up on those hills. Yeah.
It just boggles my mind that you take your gun to school.
And we would even hitchhike. We'd hitchhike.
With your guns and
with the guns out and go hunting out around Granite Dells and all. And then
what did you hunt typically, besides rabbit?
Well, that was a little bit later, but in those days, junior high, just hunting for rabbits and quail, you know. But then later, I hunted deer. My dad carrying the mail, he would drop me off in Coyote Wash. It was a very good little place to. Nobody lived out there, and up in those little hills. And so he'd drop me off in the morning, and I'd spend all day, and then catch him in the afternoon, the second run when he came back. Wow. And I'd have friends with me sometimes, 1, 2. Then a little older, I was 14. He dropped us off in Mingus Mountain because you could hunt deer there. Without a permit. All you need is a hunting license. I killed my first deer up one of those canyons with a friend of mine.
What kind of gun did you use?
I had a 30-30 then, 30-30 Winchester, and shot the first deer, little 3-point. Nice. And we wrestled him over the hill because we're just kids, 14 years old. Big. Wrestled him over the hill and drug him all down the hill to the road. And we couldn't carry him, we were too little. And by the time we got there, the hair was mostly worn off of one side.
Right. And waited for your dad to pull up?
Yeah, we waited till he come down and caught him and loaded in and took it home.
In your book, An Open Door with Ron Simpkins, you said that you had become a two-bit hoodlum who never got caught. And you remember there were gamblers with loaded dice at the head hotel who would cheat people. Did those guys influence you? And did you start smoking and drinking at this time?
Oh, I started smoking probably then, early age, probably before that. But we used to, as a matter of fact, we used to smoke grapevines. I don't know if you know, the grapevines have vents in them, and then cedar bark with newspaper. Wow. Just typical what kids do. And so petty theft and road drunks and so on. Nothing.
I've heard some pretty wild stories about Prescott. Can you tell us some more about that?
In what way?
Like about Whiskey Row and what the town was like?
Well, the town was pretty wild. I remember they had prostitution down where the Valley National Bank used to be. What is the bank now? There's Rex Arms.
It's Chase.
Well, everybody knew that it was prostitution.
Now it's legalized. It was legalized at that time.
Well, I don't know if it was legal, but it was allowed. My thought is probably that it was just there's a payoff behind the scenes. And so when I worked in the head hotel, they had a slot machine as you went around to the restroom. That was
so there was gambling too.
Gambling too, yeah, and I don't think that was legal either.
After graduation, you joined the Air Force?
Yeah, after graduation, I actually moved to Flagstaff and worked for a period of time in a Dodge dealership as a parts helper assistant with a brother-in-law. Because I had a sister then, was married to a man who was a mechanic in Flagstaff. I got a job in that garage. then somewhere later that year, I can't remember all the details, but I became unemployed. I think I went to Baghdad and wasn't able to get on at Baghdad because some of our guys that graduated worked at Baghdad, and was good pay and solid employment, but it's isolated, see.
Uh-huh.
So I didn't get on there, and I remember I went to Flagstaff, back to where my sister lived, and they had moved. I didn't know where, no communication.
Oh, boy.
And so through a fluke, my brother-in-law walked in and saw me. So anyhow, I was out without money, no employment, and I joined the Air Force simply to survive, actually.
What was boot camp like in those days?
Well, I don't think it would have been much different than any boot camp now. They just took green kids that from all walks of life and put them in, and then shaved all their hair off, threw clothes at them, and began to teach them to march classes. Just make someone that would submit to authority is actually what it was. And then from there, you went on to a training school. They gave you testing to see what your adaptability was. And they sent me to Rantoul, Illinois. I can't remember the name of the air base now, but it was a tech school to train mechanics and equipment repairmen. And I actually was trained as a flying electrician by the Air Force.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I did, because it was challenging. It wasn't just piecework. You go out and you had to troubleshoot, think, read blueprints, and actually come up with a solution. Never realized at the time how much of an advantage that was through other than just being a kitchen attendant or a military policeman or whatever.
Right.
Because it
problem solving.
It put skills in you. It's problem
Right.
solving. Yeah.
And then after that, where were you stationed?
Being adventurous and romantic, I put on my word I'd like to go was the South Pacific, and they sent me there. So I said, so out of that, I went to Guam, the Marianas Islands, which had just barely come out of World War II. Was very, very primitive.
And so, while you were there, you fought in the Golden Gloves.
Yeah.
What was that?
Kinda.
Kinda. What
Yeah.
was that? Was that just to kill time?
Yeah, nothing to do. Absolutely isolated. There's absolutely nothing to do. We spent a lot of time in the gym, and marching over the cliff to the sea and trying to find anything to do. And so I took up boxing, fought in the Golden Gloves, probably in 1950 there. But in the first fight, I got headbutted and broke my nose.
And that was it?
That was it, yeah. And I finished out the fight, but my nose swelled, and was swelled for a long time.
So when you were discharged for the Air Force, where did you go next?
Well, I was there, the Korean War broke out. And so North Korea invaded South Korea, and overnight they mobilized everything on Guam. There was a B-29 bomb squadron, the 19th Bomb Wing, and I don't remember how many B-29s we had, but they had no bomb racks in them. And so day and night we're putting bomb racks in, we're pulling ordnance out of the jungle, and the whole squadron went to Okinawa and Japan and South Korea. And I was the only one left in the shop. Why, I had no idea. But they left me and a civilian employee were the only ones in that maintenance shop. That was quite interesting because a lot of responsibility, which wasn't my rank at all, because I think I was a private first class, probably one stripe. Then the civilian employee was an old drunk. He was an alcoholic. And so he was useless. And so I had the whole responsibility of the maintenance department. We would have to work on the planes that came through that were shuttling over to Okinawa or Japan. And then in the process of time, they sent in other young men from the U.S. that are in the military, just came in. And a lot of them were not trained at all. They didn't know a thing. And so I had the responsibility, took the responsibility, studied to better myself. And in the extended bar enlistment, we only went there for 14 months because very isolated. It was very hard duty. They wouldn't leave you because the guys would go tropo. They froze our enlistment. I was in 6 months. Korean War broke out. They froze our enlistments and froze our tour duty. So you didn't know how long you're going to be there or how long you're going to be in. I was actually there 21 months. Wow. But as a result of taking responsibility, I got promotions. And when I came off there, I was staff sergeant.
And so after that, where did you go?
Then I came back to Norton Air Force Base in San Bernardino, which was actually a deactivated base somewhat. It was still open, but it wasn't very active. And I was only there, I can't remember, it's a short few months, and there's nothing to do there either. It was just like just spending time. But there were men who had been stationed there for a good while, and one of the men that was in the shop where I was got orders for Big Spring, Texas. But he was married, had a family, and he did not want to go. And he asked me if I'd trade orders with him. I said, Big Spring, Texas? Mountain fishing? Yeah. And so I traded orders with him. And Big Spring, Texas was a training base for fighter pilots. Was the last stage. They flew piston aircraft, T-28, but it was the last stage before they graduated to jets. And there was a 7-year drought had been going on there. They hadn't seen a drop of water in 7 years. It was Big Spring by name only.
Not much hunting to go.
Nothing but dust. The dust storms would come in. They'd be like 10, 15 feet in the air.
Oh.
Totally like clouds. And I've actually laid in the barracks and heard the wind kick small pebbles against the side. You could hear it.
Yeah.
It was terrible. Very bad drought. And then my enlistment was up September 29th, 1953, I think. 52, September 9th, 1952, yeah.
And so you were done. You didn't want to stay in Texas.
No, they offered me, which was quite interesting, they offered to send me to officers training school, candidate school. I said, no way, I'm out of here. I'll be my own man.
Okay. So do they pay for you to go home or after that?
They give you a discharge. I have no idea if it's severance pay. I don't have any idea.
Did you end up back in Phoenix then? Or?
Yeah, I came to Phoenix. So that's where my mother was.
Okay.
So not having any other roots or anything, I came to Phoenix. Yeah. I went to work for the phone company, but it was brain dead work. You work on a frame room, solder wires all day long, no challenge of any kind. And then I put in for Luke Air Force Base and got on the Luke Air Force Base as a civilian employee.
Oh, nice.
And worked on aircraft again.
And so back home in Arizona, in your free time, you'd go out. Where did you go?
Yeah,
those days? Wasn't there a place that a lot of people would go?
Well, wherever. I can't remember all the things we did, but Riverside Ballroom was a central spot for meeting girls, and I mean, it was huge, and it was kind of the central spot of people.
People would come from all over the state.
Yeah, all over Phoenix.
And that was
country western dance. Yeah, bands play.
Okay, and you met Nelda Sue Henderson there.
Yeah, I had actually known her briefly because when I was in Phoenix Union High School, I would often ride to school with her brother, who had it wasn't a motorcycle, it was kind of like a motorcycle, what would you call them then, motorbike then. And he would take me to school quite frequently. And so knowing him, then Arizona Park was an area that they built during World War II, housing, and quite a settlement of people came out there. It was quite a new lower housing. Yeah, because you had almost like barracks for housing.
Right.
And the center of activity there was a skating rink that they'd built. Very primitive. It's not much more than a cement slab, but a lot of teenagers went there. And so when I was in high school, I had met her, my Nelda, and she was 12 years old. Wow. And pretty tough little girl in Levi's and so on. But she was just a little girl then. So when I went to dancing Riverside Ballroom, lo and behold, there she is, and she's a beautiful young woman.
Because you already knew her, you just walked up to her and started talking
I can't remember the exact detail, but somehow...
Or did she come up to you?
No, I went up to her, recognized her probably, and she was with some of her friends that she still, once a year, they get together, go to Phoenix and all that, blah. She just did this last week. And some of the friends she was with, two of the girls, Peggy Page and Emily Emily Page, both were there that night.
Wow.
And I think I probably danced with them. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Was it, what kind of dancing? It was country music.
Just country, Western dance. You just do it's a foxtrot, you call it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How long did you court before you
6 weeks.
popped the question?
Before we got married, 6 weeks. Yeah.
6 weeks before you got married?
Yep.
When did you ask her to marry you?
I don't have any idea.
Right
probably,
away.
Pretty quick, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so when you asked her, did you have a ring?
No. No, we bought rings. The 2 rings cost $32.
$32.
And I still have one on now. All the design is worn off. I have no idea where we bought them. Somewhere in a jewelry store. And we went to Wickenburg to get married.
And that was on February 7, 1953. Was it in a church there in Wickenburg?
Oh, no. They had a marriage chapel there. That you could go there and get married. And so taxi.
Who stood up with you?
A taxi driver was one witness. And I think the marrying guy's wife was the other witness. That was in Cape Prescott for a honeymoon.
And so you were how old at that time?
I would have been 23 probably.
And your wife was?
She would have been 19. Yeah.
She was 19.
Barely 19.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so you did go on a honeymoon?
To Prescott, yeah.
Of course. Where did you stay? The AJ Head?
If I remember correctly, it's a Mission Inn, which is, what is it today? It's still there. It was called the Mission Inn then.
Mm-hmm. Did Mrs. Mitchell's parents approve of you?
I would say they probably did. Yeah, there was not. She's pretty independent herself too. Her father was alcoholic and spent very little time in the house. And her mother was old school, solid homemaker.
Right.
But and I met her, but
she was probably happy to see your daughter.
I would say so.
To a cute guy.
I would say so. Yeah.
And where did
someone who had a job?
So you were working at the Air Force Base.
Yeah.
Okay. And where did her parents live?
They lived on
in the same
35 West Taylor. But on this side, on the west side of 35th Avenue. Yeah.
And then so after you guys were married, how soon after that did Mrs. Mitchell become pregnant with your first child?
Pretty quick, because our first child was born right about 9.5, 10 months around there. Yeah, pretty quick.
Where did she give birth to her?
Good Samaritan Hospital.
Mm-hmm. Down in Phoenix, still there, right?
Yep.
Were there any complications?
No.
And what did you name her?
Teresa Susan.
And everything was going fine, and then what happened?
Well, this little child caught pneumonia and very quickly deteriorated. I don't know if it was sun pneumonia or what it was. Mm-hmm. But she began to have seizures, seizure. And we rushed her to the county hospital, and she passed away soon thereafter, which was tremendous trauma to both of us, yeah.
And so you were both obviously grief-stricken. Your mother had left you, you lost your father, and now your daughter passed away. Yeah. What happened after that?
Well, I have a brother who was a Christian, who was my older brother, George.
When did he become a Christian?
Way back, like when he's 18 or so. Him and his wife are both Christian. I can't remember all the details of that, but I know that they were. But he was a member of the Foursquare Church in Phoenix. But by the time the child came along, I was not working. I was unemployed and destitute, no money, nothing. And my older brother came on the scene, and he just gave me a blank check and said, whatever the funeral costs are, you just fill it in there. And so that was pretty impressive. Yeah. And so through the openness to that, they got us to go to church. And that's when we were saved in Phoenix Foursquare Church. Yeah.
And so after you and Mrs. Mitchell were born again, you attended church regularly?
Pretty regularly. I wouldn't say that it's like full bore on. And as I spoke in a sermon when I preached on hospitality, a lot of it had to do with my brother and his wife, because we knew that if we went to church, they'd invite us out for lunch. and that was a real appeal.
Right.
And so
that was a good attraction.
Yeah, it was probably a year before it really got locked in, I'd say.
And were you working then after that, or?
Yeah, was I working? Can't remember. I got back on at Luke, but it seemed to me I was a mechanic in a service station for a while. I did 2-3 different jobs, but I got back on at Luke Field as a civilian employee also. Yeah.
And so, in your early days as a Christian, when God would deal with you about issues in your life, because sin causes so many layers of hurt and bitterness in our lives, were you slow to release them at first, or did you immediately let God have all those burdens?
Yeah, I think the real turning point for me was when I was filled with the Holy Spirit, probably 10 months or so after I was saved. It seemed to be the real turning point.
You've testified that for you, the bondage of cigarettes was like getting free from a heroin addiction.
Right.
How long were you saved before you got free from the cancer sticks? And how did God convey to you that you were a slave to them and that he wanted to set you free from them and alcohol?
I would say probably a year and a half before I really was wanting to be free from cigarettes. Yeah, I'd say that. And
what else did God show you in those early days?
Well, you're pretty dim about the Christian life when you're a new convert. And the thing probably that helped us the most, and of course it was a small church. I don't think the church ever did run over 130, 40 people, if it ran that much. But the thing that was really touched us is that Foursquare missionaries would come to Phoenix to the Thunderbird language school to learn Spanish to go to the mission field. And so there was a string of those families, I would say maybe 5 different families that came through there. And of course they had the missionary vision and the enthusiasm.
Right.
And they made a deep impression on me. And so them and that church, the pastors were missionary oriented. They would give exposure and so on. And so that really did make an impression on me. And during that period of time that I felt that I wanted to be a minister. And so knowing nothing about the Christian life, I mean, so I went to the pastors and said, I think I want to be a pastor. So during this period of time, I'd go to the mission down Skid Row, and they'd let you preach down there.
Right.
And street preached in Glendale. And that time, Glendale was a totally separate city.
Right.
We'd go into the Glendale Park and street preach in the park as an outreach. And so there was no organized activity at all, like what we have today.
Right.
What we have today didn't exist. So, and so the motivation was there without any kind of direction. So when I told the pastors I wanted to preach, they said, well, you need to go to Bible school. But knowing that they wanted to make an impression, they said, but you can take correspondence. And we will teach a class, I think, once a week. So from Life Bible College of Los Angeles, California, I took correspondence courses, but then they taught live once a week. And then they would have a missionary sometimes teach a class. And if a minister came in, like an N.M. Van Cleve, who was a very good teacher, he'd teach a class. And so I did a nearly a year correspondence course. And then I wanted to go on to Bible school and moved to Los Angeles and started Life Bible College.
So when you got filled with the Holy Ghost before you went away to Bible school, you also felt God impress upon you that he wanted to move and use you in the nations of the world and in the islands of the sea.
Well, yeah, this is kind of an interesting thing because there's nothing, what you see today in our church is nothing like what we were in. But I answered an altar call one day. There's group of people there in a little church, and some man came up and laid his hands on me, and it was a dramatic experience. And I thought that somebody opened the side door because I audibly heard a rushing wind, and I was filled with the Holy Spirit dramatically, and I was still there. weeping and praying when they told my wife, said, when he's finished, we'll close the doors, you go out. And so it was, I don't detract from people get filled with the Holy Spirit. It's wonderful. But it wasn't anything like you see here this week. And this was a dramatic experience. Yeah. During that time, I prophesied about preaching to the nations of the world. And while I was being filled with the Holy Spirit under that power.
And inside, you knew that was a prophecy to you?
No, I didn't. I didn't have the slightest clue what that was all about.
Oh, okay.
No. And it was later that I just...
You remembered it?
Oh, yeah. Well, I still remember to this day. Mm-hmm. But I later began to feel that I wanted to preach, No, I didn't have the slightest clue. It was after I'm involved that I began to think back to that period of time. Uh-huh. Sometime during this period, I had a dream from the Lord, and I saw myself preaching in Angel's Temple.
Next to the Bible College?
Yeah. Uh-huh. It's phenomenal. And so I'd never been there, never knew what it was, never saw it. But it was in 1978 I actually was preaching in Angel's Temple in a morning seminar. And it's phenomenal. So at any rate, that's a kind of diverting, but I can't remember the exact sequence, but it would have been probably 1956 when or maybe 55, when I really said I want to preach, and I started the correspondence corps. Could have been 56, because 57 is when I moved to California and started.
Oh, and so you had kids by this time.
Oh yeah, we had 2 children, Karen and Sharon.
And then while you were at school, you had to work too, right?
Oh yeah, no money. So I worked daytime in a job doing repair work on coin-metered washing machine. When I went there, I was working in the aircraft industry. I went to work for Lockheed Aircraft, but they finished off that program and laid me off. I got a job at Douglas, Santa Monica in the missile system, but it was too far a drive. And I, meanwhile, landed this job fixing washers and dryers 10 blocks from where we live.
Right.
So I said, no, I'm going to do that. I want to do this. I figured we can make a living at it. And so I would work all day, take service calls all over Los Angeles and Los Angeles County, and go to school at night. So I'd go 3 hours at night. And
how long did it take you to get through?
Well, 3 years. And it was a devastating physical and mental
challenge.
Yeah, I'd come in because you're driving all day.
Right.
I'd come in at night, and for 30 minutes I'd just lay on my back on the living room floor, and then she'd be fixing supper, have that ready. I'd get up, eat, and then go to Bible school.
Out the door again.
And so by the time I finished with the stress of that, also I ran into in Bible school, they had begun to teach eternal security. And I knew that wasn't correct.
Now, isn't that a Pentecostal college?
Oh, yeah, but they infiltrate, see.
Oh, okay.
And they had people in charge and instructors that were into eternal security. The dean of the Bible college was, so he filled the slots with teachers. And so that, I'm battling against that. I know that's not right, but you're that stressed. So by the time I got out of Bible school, I was stressed out of my mind.
And plus, they labeled you a rebel.
Yeah, I couldn't hack that. And then, of course, my pastors in Phoenix, they knew that was going on, too. So we would go back, if we had a long weekend, like had a holiday, we would drive home to Phoenix and be in our home church, see?
Right.
And then drive back and go back to work on.
And so, in spite of all that trouble, you got your degree.
A license, yeah.
License, is that what it is?
Yeah.
What is the title of your license?
Ministerial license.
And so then you took your very first position was as a youth pastor?
Came back to Phoenix in the Foursquare Church and actually was supposed to be the youth pastor.
For your brother's church there. And
yeah.
And so what happened there?
Well, it was like a joke because the kids were living for God. And so that's a vexation. And so trying to do that, but I was there. How long was I there? I can't remember how long I was there, but I said, usually I worked some. I didn't draw full salary, but they just helped us some. And so I was there from June of 1960 until 1961, probably early in the year, they offered me the church in Wickenburg. So there was actually probably 17 people in the church and a building and a place to live.
And so in Wickenburg, you and Sister Mitchell pastored. Who was the leader of the Foursquare denomination at the time?
Ralph McPherson.
Okay.
Yeah.
His mother, Amy, had died by then or just retired?
Yeah. No, she died.
Was gone. Okay.
Yeah, she died in 1944, I think.
Did you ever get to meet Rolf?
Yeah, oh yeah. I've been in the room when they were interrogating me.
Oh.
Yeah.
And so...
That's later on.
Yeah, that's down the road. And so then, after the Wickenburg church, you fought some battles there and won some?
Yeah, so you get out of Bible school and you're oriented to Sunday school. Mm-hmm. So the idea is you get the children in, then the parents will follow them. Well, that's what folly. It's not true. And the cliche was, and a little child shall lead them. So, but that hadn't fully dawned yet there. Mm-hmm. And so we haul people to church, welfare people from everywhere. And so we built it up. Maybe we might have been running 50 people. And so I learned some things about... Which is
pretty big for that town, isn't it? Pretty big church.
Yeah, but they weren't all adults, a lot of kids. So, but I learned some good lessons about money. I began to break through and begin to believe God for money. We were working almost exclusively with older people. Right. The only younger people we had would have been the children of one or two families. But it was a session where, and I wouldn't work full time. I'd drive to Phoenix and work one day a week, and that would so we got a place to live on, and enough to keep the wolf from the door. Sometimes I'd work 2 days. They would have employed me full time, but I wouldn't do it. I said I want to put my time in. So I did a lot of studying, a lot of reading, and a lot of that. No musician. We didn't have any musician. They were singing a cappella. And then finally got a musician before we left. A pianist came in from outside. But then, not much potential in Wickenburg. So it's 1,500 people then in the summertime, 2,500 in the wintertime. Oh, right. Because they come into the dude ranch, you see.
Oh, really?
And then the workers come in there, yeah.
I see.
It's a big dude ranch. People come in from back east, pay big money to go out and ride a horse and build a campfire. And
play cowboy.
Yeah.
So then after Wickenburg, you guys ended up in Eugene, Oregon. Is that right?
Well, no, we first went to Courtenay, Canada.
Oh, okay.
So I was
that on Vancouver Island?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I wanted to go somewhere else. And so in the organization, you apply and they tell you where there's openings and all. So they offered me a church in Vancouver Island, Canada. And that's quite an adventure. So here we launch out. Mm-hmm. They took a love offering for us in the Phoenix church before we left. I think it was $200. And so, now we've got 4 kids and a business coupe Chevrolet. Would have been a 52 probably. We load everything we have in a little box trailer. And somewhere in California, we had car trouble. Made it off the freeway, and luckily there was a garage right there, and it had a cracked head in the car. And so I think it was like $175 it took of that. So we make it into Canada. We're landed immigrants, they called us, and rode the ferry to Vancouver Island and took a church there where the pastor had run off with the Sunday school superintendent or something. And so that was a broken down church. And
they stuck you with these broken down churches.
That's all I got, yeah. So we were there a year. So there we did child evangelism. My wife helped me. We did flannel graph out in these little settlements out from Courtenay. And still running the Sunday school thing. We're still on that. Broke the record.
You would take the stories out to people?
Yeah.
I see.
Oh, yeah. And you know what flannel graph is? Mm-hmm. Okay. So that was the latest technology then.
Wow.
So we're a child evangelist. So, good experience. We had you're trying to solidify and then, but I became discouraged in not seeing the thing really go.
Right.
She became pregnant again. She wasn't happy about that. And so I came back to Scottsdale, Arizona. And so I started. But that time I'm pretty disturbed about the Foursquare. It's not, the whole thing is not gelling. And so I started attending an independent Pentecostal church on East McDowell. Fellowship Tabernacle was a pretty strong independent church then.
And they were Pentecostal?
They were Pentecostal, yeah, but even the pastor was a scam artist. So I wasn't happy with that. I ran into another man who was out of the ministry, and he and I began to talk, and so we rented an old ranch house on Scottsdale Road. Now you got to understand, Scottsdale then is not at all
kind
what
of
it is
a
now.
Yeah. Too.
And so somebody bought that old house as a speculation because they knew property was going to rise.
Right.
And so we rented that and knocked out some walls and started an independent church, which is the People's Church of Scottsdale.
Now, is that church still in existence?
I think so, yeah. And so, but as I began to see him, he's a manipulator. I wasn't happy there. And so then I made application.
So you guys were co-pastors?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So to speak.
And,
I don't see you
doing
well with that.
That was the beginning of the charismatic movement right at that time. So we got a lot of spirit-filled people. So then I put in the application for a church in the Northwest District, which we had been under a man when we were in Canada. And he offered us Emmett, Idaho. And so that had a building, had a house, lived to it. So we were there 3 years. It was like a farming community. Boise Cascade Lumber Mill.
So it was prosperous, and you had a good group.
Not very good.
Okay, and then Emmett, Idaho.
From Emmett, we went to Eugene, Oregon.
And I remember you mentioning in Eugene is where you were confronted with a demonic manifestation in one of your people. Or was it just somebody in town there that called you?
No, it's Emmett, Idaho, where we had a woman that called us to a farmhouse up in Montour, which was close to Emmett, little settlement. And the lady had 2 demon-possessed boys that had gotten into stars.
Astrology.
Astrology.
Yeah.
And so
that was the door that they opened, and the demons were able to...
Yeah, they were both supposedly Christian boys and gotten into astrology, and was not successful. It's like the 7 sons of Sceva that threw me out.
You didn't understand how to deal with it at that time.
No.
And that was in Emmett. And then you guys ended up going to Eugene.
Eugene, Oregon, yeah.
And how was that?
Well, and that was where we took the church, practically no people, maybe 3 families. And it was a rundown building, hadn't had a pastor for 3 months, I think. And so, but that was a learning experience. And so there we really began to get a visitation of young people. And our own girls were teenagers then. Okay. And their friends were being brought in. And so, but we weren't there that long to really see what God was really moving young people all over America. And
what year was that?
1969. And so, so from there we went to Carson, California. Took a church in Carson, but there were 7 women who all had a preaching credential from Slim Boatwright. And so I told my wife...
From who?
Slim Boatwright. He is from Prescott, actually. Hester Boatwright was in the church when we came here. So he was an evangelist. He had his own organization. But I told my wife, I said, we could build a church here, but I'll have to clean everything out here. It's just a mess. Because I no sooner got there, they told them they had credentials and they like to preach. So I had wanted to come. By that time, I'm pretty jaded about the denominational thing. And so I had wanted to come to Prescott before, but they wouldn't open it to me. And so they called me from there and said, Prescott's open, are you interested? So the pastor had to run off with the Sunday school superintendent. His son had to run off with the pianist, I think. And it was devastated.
So once again, they waited until the thing was falling apart to give it to you.
And desperate to get anybody to come in here.
Do you feel now that it was God's plan all along to hone you for His
I'd say so.
ministry?
Yeah.
For all these broken places with all these broken people?
Yes.
And how did the Foursquare leaders at that time help you with the financial burden of moving to
No,
these?
never. You moved on your own. We went to conventions. I had a Veterans Administration insurance policy, which you got a rebate on every year. We'd use that to go to convention. When I went to Eugene, it was the parsonage was absolutely devastated, and I got them to send me, I think, $200 to help get a sink in order and so on. But when we came to Prescott, they helped me with 3 months, I think at $100 a month, if I recall correctly, and that's it. But we moved on our own. There's nothing.
And then typically, isn't that the way most denominations work?
I'd say that it is.
To this day?
I'd say most of them.
That's
so what we do is totally foreign. Many of the principles that I practice and put into these people, some of the Lord dealt with me about and revealed to me now, are because of what we experienced then.
What you lived through.
Getting men equipment. We had no equipment. You know, I preached for years out of PA system. There was no PA. You do. By the time Sunday's over, you're croaking.
What state, I mean, besides the congregation here in Prescott was pretty shot. There was how many people left after the...
There's 29 people, including my family of 7 in the first service.
And what impact did the dedication of Bob and Sharon Allen have on your life?
Well, major help. Bob and Sharon and the Copelands were the 2 families that were left. And we had an older couple. We had the Baileys, Victoria Johnson, today Baileys. Those families were all there, but they were not that solid. I mean, they're not, but Bob and Sharon Allen and the Copelands were solid people. And I had told my wife, I said, if these people will stay in the church, we'll take it, because you got the building, you got to start. And so I stopped in Prescott Valley where they worked at a restaurant out there, the old A-frame Prescott Valley Motel there. And I think it was Sharon was working there. Could have been Barbara Copeland, I can't remember. And so we sat down and said, we're here to look at the church. And are you folk going to stay in the church? You leave the church? And they said, well, if we got a good pastor, well, we'd probably stay. And so I said, well, we're thinking seriously about doing it. And we drove in, then came over the hill, and I just felt like this is what we need to do. But by that time, I'm totally jaded with church programs, the organization. But to be honest with you, I said, we got a house to live in, we can raise our family, I can preach, and so we'll just we'll make it go somehow.
And so Sharon says that the very first paycheck she wrote to you as pastor was made out to Raymond Mitchell. Yeah. And she says she thought you had a speech impediment when you said Wayman.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
And then soon after you got here, the Jesus People movement began sweeping across the country.
Yeah, it was already moving before we got here, but we didn't recognize it or not, because you have to understand that in the church world then, young people in church practically didn't exist. As soon as they hit the teen years, they're gone. Yeah.
And so you started seeing the young rock and rollers get miraculously saved and set free from drugs. You went over to California and saw it happening.
Yeah.
When many churches would run them off.
Yes.
Why did you react differently?
I just felt the impulse that here's when I saw, and you have to understand it wasn't that large. We went into a little building in California. I can't remember the name of the city now, but La Habra. We went into a little storefront building, and it wouldn't have held over 75 young people, if that many. But they were sitting on the floor, they're everywhere, and they were outside milling. And this was a little rinky-dink musical thing. And I'd never seen young people in a church. I mean, you have to understand, young people didn't go to church in those days. And so I saw that, and when I saw that, I leaned over to Ron Jones, who was with me, and Ron Burl. I'd taken them over. We're on the Courthouse Plaza, the 4th of July, in a taco booth, which we were doing then. And we'd heard about what's happening in California. And I said, let's go over and see what's there. So I took them over on a weekend, and I leaned over to them and I said, this will work in Prescott. And so we assume that we asked if we could talk to the guy. The guy's Don Madison is running that. Said, would you come to Arizona and do a concert for us? And we'd like to break in. They said, yeah, I'll do that. So we made an appointment with him. We rented the old boys club, which was the old junior high school. It had been the junior high school. It was it was rented out to people then. And when he got here, we're thinking he's going to bring the band, the equipment. When he gets here, he's got 2 hippies with acoustic guitars. So we rush out and rent a PA system. They were the stereos that you put in your home stereo system, and a PA head and 2 microphones. And we put this thing on. And then Eden also, Ron Burrow and Stephen, they had visited the church off and on some, but we got them to come and play also. But it was a rinky-dink program. But to our astonishment, there's 200 young people came into that gymnasium there in the old boys club. We're off and running. I said, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen.
All of a sudden, you became in love with rock and roll?
Absolutely, yeah. So then from that, we went and rented the old building on Granite Street, where the Freeman Eye is right there in that building. About 35 feet long and maybe 20 feet wide. And that was, called it the Door. Okay. And that, it cranked it up, and that's where it all started right there.
When did you change the church name to the Potter's House? And how did you choose that name?
We changed it actually when we went independent from the Foursquare in 1985. I had been to Australia and had come back, and the Potter's House was the name of our church that we had in Australia, and so we changed it when we came out of Foursquare.
How did the Foursquare denomination react to that?
Well, at first they were elated with it because it was happening, and at that time Jack Hayford was just barely breaking into that in a little church out in Van Nuys. He actually got a split from a Jesus People's group of 200 young people. That's where he got his break on that and put him on the map. So over here, we're hidden away in no man's land. But they can't ignore us. I mean, this thing's happening.
Jack was part of the Foursquare.
Oh, yeah, and so was I. And so they can't ignore it. There's hundreds of young people that are coming through getting saved, and our church is growing. And so they think this is great. This is fantastic. From a Jesus People's group of 200 young people. That's where he got his break on that and put him on the map. So over here, we're hidden away in no man's land. But they can't ignore us. I mean, this thing's happening.
Jack was part of the Foursquare.
Oh, yeah, and so was I. And so they can't ignore it. There's hundreds of young people that are coming through getting saved, and our church is growing. And so they think this is great. This is fantastic. Right. It was when we started planting churches we ran into problem. At first, it was a tremendous thing because we put Harold in Tucson, an old building. We pioneered a church in Wickenburg, Ron Burrow. It was 7 months. It was self-supporting. We put a worker in the old, they call it the Northeast Church in 28th Street in Phoenix. Joe Camel went in there and took a church. So these old churches, they couldn't get pastors to come into them. Nobody would come into them. But we're so that was great.
No, but this was out of the Prescott Church's pocketbook.
Oh, yeah.
You didn't go to the Foursquare people to get the money to do any of it.
No, we financing all of this. And so then when we started getting some momentum and we started planting churches then in New Mexico and into Mexico, into Germany, and we tried to work with them, but and send the money to the organization. They sent it out. It take a month and a half for the money to get there. So we
for your missionaries that you sent out, the money you sent for the people had to go through their
headquarters in and out. So they're bogged down with administration, and so we saw that won't work. Yeah. So then we started bypassing.
It's like big government.
Yes, we started bypassing them. They could call us on the phone. We could send it the next day or the same day.
Right.
And so that started causing major stress. Plus, we would go to the conferences, like they have district conferences. Right. And here's these young couples. They're overwhelming this thing. And all that's there is senior citizens. They're 10 years from the grave, and they're filled with, and so it's putting them, it's intimidating them.
Oh.
And so, our idea is we're going to revive the organization. Right. This is wonderful. But what we don't understand is happening is this groundswell of resentment. And when we went to Glorieta, New Mexico in 1983, my wife and I, because I was a division superintendent, you have a meeting first with all these and with the international board to buy laws. They buy you a dinner and talk about things. And so the first speaker said, I want to make a motion. I want to make a motion that we throw the Arizona Fellowship out of the Foursquare. They caused us a major problem. So we're sitting there. So here's 300 people in this room, and for 2.5 hours they thrash us over. And so I saw there, we're not going to it's all over. It's done. So out of that, I went to and called Harold Warner on the phone. I said, Harold, they ain't going to accept us. Not going to happen. And then what I tried to do, I said, let all of our guys be independent. I've been Foursquare for 25 years. I'll just stay and plant churches. I know that they won't remove me because I know how they operate. And so I'll just stay Foursquare. We keep planting independent churches. That's what we'll do. But God just dealt with me, and I felt like I'd been molested. Mm-hmm. And not until I said, no, I'm going out. I don't care what it costs. As soon as I did that, I had a release in my spirit that it's got to be separated from that. And so that's when we started our course in 1985. And
so then at that time, you basically what you did was rebought everything back from the organization that you'd already built.
We bought back the building and airplane and all the equipment for $520,000.
To say the least, a lesser man would have thrown the towel in long ago when the forces you've had to withstand came against him. What did you do to gain victory when local governments tried to stop the gospel from being presented outside the church walls?
Well, we've had some court cases, like against the school. We won a case against the school. We tried to stop our kids from passing tracts and witnessing. At Prescott High School, we won that case. We won some $68,000 for lawyers' fees back. We took them to court. They tried to stop us from using the property where the church is now for conferences and a tent. We had to take that to Phoenix. It cost us $22,000.
Was that the one that you won at the Superior Court level?
In Phoenix, yeah. And got a ruling that said you can't stop them from having church. If they're making noise or dust or whatever, or danger, you can stop it. You can't stop them from doing that. We had a public meeting. They tried to stop us from using the plaza. Had a big meeting in Hendricks Auditorium. And various times we had young people arrested on the plaza. The teenagers, they let go, but they prosecuted a black girl from Phoenix, and we defended her. It cost us $17,000. So basically, you're looking at me like this super fight, but I don't see myself that way at all. But just standing up for what's right, mm-hmm. and having the determination, you're not going to run over us. That we have rights in America.
Right. Thank God. You've witnessed firsthand God's mighty power to heal bodies, change lives, and turn total skeptics into passionate believers in Jesus Christ. Yet you yourself have been betrayed, disappointed, and personally attacked by the very ones you were instrumental in helping save and support in the ministry. How have you been able to withstand so much personal anguish over the years and still keep going like you do?
Well, it's you have to decide that you're going to do what God called you to do. And this is nothing new. In Acts 20, what Paul warned them, said, from among yourselves, men are going to rise up, draw away disciples, and grievous wolves will enter among you. So this is nothing new. You simply have to keep perspective. And I remember when in 1990, when Ron Jones and the group split, I had come to the conclusion that why should you do this and then be betrayed? And I'd even made this statement that it's a waste of time. They just they take your money, they get solvent, and they rip you off. And then God clearly spoke to me. He said, "You do what I called you to do. I'll take care of that." And so that's been my approach since then. You do have to deal with problems as they arise, both individually and with groups. But the main thing is obey God. And to some degree, we're doing what the Bible directs you to do, and it has worked, and it's been wildly successful around the world, in spite of all the betrayal, the assaults, the disappointments, discouragements.
You keep one of the craziest travel schedules of anyone I know as you take the gospel to the world. How do you do it?
Well, I guess there it is again, that it's a calling, and God has given me strength, and probably directly due to all the people who are praying for me around the world. That's the only thing I have no pain in my body. I have relatively very good health. My eyesight and hearing is not as good as it used to be.
And Greg says you eat all the wrong foods.
I probably do, yeah. But it's the excitement and the thrill of seeing God work is rejuvenating. When I began to pray for the sick, something happened to me that seemed like that I was rejuvenated in life. I can't explain it, but it's actually seeing God use you instantly, and it's not something you have to wait on. It's there, and the excitement and the thrill of doing that, the challenge, where I've seen people that disintegrate at age 60, they just kind of vegetate. Yeah. I can't even imagine not getting up in the morning, facing the day, studying the Bible, preparing sermons, going places to preach. It's just there's nothing that substitutes for it.
It's what you do,
and it has to be a supernatural dimension that rejuvenates you. That's the only explanation I have.
Are there any words of advice or encouragement you'd like to express to people today?
Well, you need a purpose in life. I'm not unique in saying that. A purpose in life is half of life, because once you have
a vision, the people perish.
Yes, that's exactly it. Without a vision, people perish. So once you get the purpose, which is you're aiming toward, and then secondly, you can't do anything of eternity without God working in your personality, in your being. I have a disciplined prayer life. I pray. I came in last night. I'm in bed at 11 o'clock from San Diego. I'm up to prayer meeting this morning, and I've done that. I've come in like 3 a.m. When I was overseas, off the flight from overseas, and I'm in prayer meeting the next morning. So there's a spiritual dimension that would join with the physical elements to give you purpose, give you energy, give you help, and so I claim often the energy of youth and old age.
There you go.
But I want to say, as you're finishing this off, that none of what I've done I could have done without a wife that is willing to back me, encourage me, go with me, and she's traveled all over the world, 3 times to Australia, and sometimes in very sparse circumstances. Most of our early ministry, we could have qualified for welfare in any city we ever pastored in. And she's
been a major help.
Massive help. Regulation, living on what we were making, and discipline, financial manager. She sewed clothes for the kids. Lived on whatever budget we have, and she's just been a wonderful, wonderful woman. And so what God has accomplished in our ministry, a large part of that has been because she's a normal wife and has taken her place and fulfilled it.